Today we're going to look at part 2, which is adding, subtracting, and multiplying complex numbers. So first we're going to look at adding and subtracting complex numbers. So this is going to be just like when we add or subtract polynomials. So we're just going to combine our like terms. And when we combine, we're going to add or subtract the real parts and add or subtract the imaginary parts. So the imaginary parts will be the parts that have the I. Remember yesterday we defined I as the square root of -1. Now the only difference when we subtract, we're going to have to distribute that negative first, then we'll add where we follow these rules. Okay, so let's look at these examples. So the directions just say simplify the following examples. So number 1 says the quantity of 5 plus 4i plus the quantity of 7 plus 2i. So all we're going to do is just add the real parts. So the 5 plus the 7, which will give us 12. Then we're going to add the imaginary parts, which is the positive 4i plus 2i, which would be plus 6i. Now, those aren't like terms, so that's just our answer, 12 plus 6i. Okay, similar on the second one, we have the quantity of -6 plus 3i plus the quantity of 5 plus I. So we'll add the real parts, so -6 plus 5, which is -1. Then we're going to add together the imaginary part, so 3i plus I. Remember this is like a 1 here, so 3i plus 1i would be 4i. Those aren't like terms, so that's just our answer, -1 plus 4i. Okay, so 3 and 4 are subtracting, so we're going to make them look like examples 1 and 2. So number 3 says the quantity of 12 minus 8i minus the quantity of 6 minus 6i. So we're going to distribute this negative first to this second set of parentheses. When we do that, that's going to give us -6 plus 6i. Then we're going to bring down this first set, which is just 12 minus 8i. Now, that just looks like examples 1 and 2. So we're going to add the real part, so 12 minus 6, which gives us positive 6. And then add the imaginary part. Notice that's a -8i and a positive 6i, so that's minus 2i. And that's our answer. Same thing on example number 4. We have the quantity of 6 minus 7i minus the quantity of -3 minus I. So since this is a subtraction, we're going to distribute this negative to the second set of parentheses. So a negative times a -3 makes that positive 3. And a negative times a -I makes that a positive I. We'll bring down the first set of parentheses, which is 6 minus 7i. Okay, and then we'll combine our like terms. So the real part, 6 plus 3 is positive 9. Then we'll do the imaginary part. -7i plus I. Remember this is a 1. So -7 plus 1 is -6i. Those aren't like terms. So that's our answer, 9 minus 6i. Okay, so now we're going to look at multiplying. So it says that we're going to distribute, remembering our powers of I, just like when we multiply polynomials. So we're basically going to use FOIL. But the big thing here where it says remembering the powers of I, remember I is the same thing as the square root of -1, which we just leave, but that means that I squared is equal to -1. So this we're going to use a lot when we multiply. So example 5, we have -2i times the quantity of 5 plus 3i. So they're right beside each other, which means we're multiplying. So we're going to distribute. So -2i times 5, so that's -10i. Then -2i times 3i is -6i squared. So you're basically using that I just like you would any other variable. The only difference here is now when we bring this down, this -10i will bring straight down, but this I squared is the same thing as -1. So this becomes -6 times -1. Well, -6 times -1 is positive 6, and then we'll just bring down this -10i. So our answer is negative 10i plus 6. So similar on number 6, we have 4i times the quantity of 3 minus 5i. So we'll distribute. So 4i times 3 is 12i. 4i times negative 5i. So 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. I times I is I squared. So you're just using I like you would any other variable. But now we're going to change this I squared into negative 1. So this becomes 12i minus 20 times negative 1. But now you can multiply that negative 20 with that negative 1. So negative 20 times negative 1 becomes plus 20, positive 20, and we'll just bring down that 12i in front. So 12i plus 20. So the last two examples here we're actually going to FOIL. So we have the quantity of 4 minus 2i times the quantity of 5 minus 3i. So we're going to take the 4, distribute it first. So 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times negative 3i is negative 12i. Then we're going to distribute the negative 2 to each. So negative 2i times 5 is negative 10i. And negative 2i times negative 3i becomes positive 6i squared. So now we're going to simplify. So this I squared once again becomes negative 1. So this is the same thing as 20 minus 12i minus 10i plus 6 times negative 1. But this 6 times negative 1 is just a negative 6. So I'm going to bring everything else down here. So now we'll just combine our like terms. So combine the real parts. So 20 minus 6 is positive 14. Combine the imaginary. Negative 12i minus 10i is negative 22i. That's our final answer. Example 8, we have 9 plus 2i times the quantity of 2 minus 7i. So once again, we're going to FOIL here. We're multiplying because they're right beside each other. So 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times negative 7i is negative 63i. Now distribute the 2i to each. So 2i times 2 is positive 4i. And 2i times negative 7i is minus 14i squared. So now we're going to simplify where we can. So this I squared, remember, becomes negative 1. So now we're going to have 18 minus 63i plus 4i minus 14 times negative 1. Well, 14 times negative 1 just becomes positive 14. So we'll have 18 minus 63i plus 4i. And then, like I said, a negative 14 times a negative 1, that becomes positive 14. So now we'll go back and combine our like terms. So the real part would be 18 plus 14, which is 32. Then we'll combine the imaginary parts, which is negative 63i plus 4i. So that's negative 59i. That's our final answer.